Why are you such a liar? Why do you lie so often? Now, I'm not accusing you of lying to others. Maybe you, if you're like me, you hold honesty as one of the highest ideals and values in your life. I would hope that most people do. But my question is, why do you so often lie to yourself? Because whether you realize it or not, this is happening all the time. And what if the biggest obstacle holding you back in your health, your relationships, even your career, isn't a lack of strategy or not knowing what to do, but simply the lies you believe about yourself? Welcome to Change Made Easy. Changing your habits, routines, and behaviors is hard. We make it easy. I'm Paul Leviton, and I help high achievers just like you who feel stuck bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Traditional self-help doesn't work. It's either too rigid, too generic, or too overwhelming. My approach is different. I simplify change by making it so easy it can't not happen. Using my easier framework, I'll help you create habits, routines, and behaviors that stick, so you can stop struggling and start thriving. It's that easy. So if it's true that you're lying to yourself, the two questions that arise are simply why and how do I stop? And today we're digging deep into both of those and unraveling the hidden scripts that quietly run your life with my guest, Mitchell Osmond. Mitchell is a speaker, coach, and the host of the Dad Nation podcast. Mitchell helps high-performing men reclaim their health, their home, and their happiness by doing the one thing most people avoid: pulling out the toxic lies lodged in their subconscious and replacing them with the truth. In this episode, you'll hear the 5 most common mental scripts that may be secretly holding you back, from things like "I'm not smart enough" to "everyone will judge me." You'll hear Mitchell's powerful, clear framework for breaking free of those lies and rewriting your story, and how Mitchell turned his own life around, dropping 60 pounds, saving his marriage, and getting out of 6 figures in debt, ending the cycles of dysfunction that have plagued his family for generations. This conversation is packed with tools and stories that will help you rethink the way you see yourself and give you the courage to start writing your next chapter. So please enjoy this conversation with Mitchell Osmond. What does it mean to believe the lies?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love it. We're just jumping straight in. Carl Jung has a quote that I love, and he says, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And so that's really the business that I'm into, man, is really drilling deep down into those lies that we believe and extracting them from the subconscious mind and replacing them with truth. My whole thing is I help high performers reclaim their home, their health, their happiness. And so the 3 things that I deal exclusively with are your key relationships with your partner and your kids, fitness, your diet, nutrition, all those different things, and then your overall mindset, emotions, all those things. But we could talk about all day about why you want a 6-pack. But if we don't ever talk about or address your emotional relationship with food, or who you believe if you believe that you're just destined to be overweight and unhealthy, we need to address that first. Just giving you a gym membership and a workout plan is putting a Band-Aid on this giant gaping wound. What we need to do is get in and scrub out the wound and stitch it up and let it heal. Or whether it's your marriage, if you just believe deep down that you're always going to be an angry, ungrateful spouse, or that you're just destined for an unhappy relationship, well, we need to get to that. And so believing the lies and learning how to replace those lies with truth is where everything begins. And I've got a framework that I'd be happy to walk you and your listeners with that I use with my one-to-one clients to help them extract that. But at the end of the day, that's everything, because we can implement strategies and tactics as much as we want. But when that's all over and said and done, when we might even meet the goals, but when we get there, we're going to self-sabotage and we're going to go right back to where we were before. This is why the statistics on weight gain, for example, are astronomical. I think it's like 95% of those who lose 30 pounds or more gain it all back and then some within, I believe it's like a year and a half. I know people who have gotten full on, their stomach stapled, lost like 100 pounds and gained it all back. It's because they're not addressing the deep inner narrative, which is the lies that they believe about themselves. Does that make sense?
Hey, real quick, we'll be back to the show in just a few seconds. But right now, I have to tell you about the free Change Made Easy private Facebook community. If you want to join hundreds of change seekers just like you and get free trainings, resources, and direct help from me in order to help make your quest for change easy, then click the link in the show notes that says Facebook group now. You'll be directed to my private Facebook group that I created just for clients and listeners of this podcast. And as a bonus, you'll get a free hour-long training on eliminating self-sabotage. All you have to do is click Facebook group in whatever podcast app you're listening on right now. Okay, let's get back to the show. 100%. And I'm right there with you. We're speaking the same language. I talk about the same things. Health, wealth, and relationships are the three major pillars. This podcast, before I rebranded, was actually called the Happy, Healthy Human Podcast. And that's what my whole life's work is, to just help people be happier and healthier. And we're all humans. So I'm right there with you. And I definitely want to get to those frameworks. But I want to take a step back and just stay on the concept of the lies that we tell ourselves. And you mentioned, that this all leads to self-sabotage. I did an episode a few weeks back. I'll post in the show notes for those listening. That's literally 30 days to end self-sabotage. And I come to basically the same conclusion, which is like, when you have these negative self-talk, negative mindsets, all of these pieces, the only natural conclusion is self-sabotage, because it's just you getting in your own way. You're going to talk yourself out of doing the thing. I can't do this. This won't work, whatever. And then you end up quitting. That's self-sabotage. But I'm curious if there are any lies, as you call them, mindsets, whatever, that you've seen that kind of are underlying everything else. And I'll expand on that a bit. I'm going to do couples therapy with my fiance now, as just a interesting thing to do, because we have our own issues, as all couples do, but just because we want to be better. And in our most recent therapy, actually, the therapist introduced the concept of like an emotion wheel, and basically gave us the homework of figuring out what are the underlying emotions. Like there's the secondary emotion, which I might say is frustration, or being confused, or being upset. But the underlying main emotion in that is always anger. If I dig a little bit deeper, it's like my frustration is really just, I'm just angry that things didn't go my way. If I'm confused, it's because I'm angry that she did something differently. There's the high level, what I think of when someone says, how are you feeling right now? I'm feeling frustrated. But then I dig a layer deeper, and then there's anger. So I'm curious if they're thinking about the lies that we tell ourselves in the same way, right? You said like, oh, I just need a gym membership and then everything's going to be okay. Or I just need this amount of money. What is the underlying lie, or a few of them, that you've seen in working with so many professionals and husbands, wives, whoever, that you've seen kind of play out amongst all different people?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I would say that there are 5 what I would call toxic mental scripts that I've seen repeated over and over again. And I'll share those 5 with you. And for those of you who are listening, I want you to put yourself in this situation and think about, which of these have I been believing? I know that I've believed all 5 of these at one point or another. And still they pop up. It's like whack-a-mole, man. It's like you get to a new level and it's like, boom, it comes back up again, and you whack it back down. But the first one is, I'm not smart enough to fill in the blank. Now, this is a scarcity script where you don't believe that you have the intellect. The second script is, it's too late to try something new. Okay. This one is, it's easy to say that you don't have enough time, but the truth is you'll never have more time than you have right now. A lot of these are about scarcity, actually. The third one is, if I do this, blank, this is what's going to happen. And this is where we begin to play fortune teller. And we have the arrogance to think that we actually can read the future. But let me remind you that you do not know what you do not know. And you can't tell the future. The fourth script is, I don't have enough, and you fill in the blank with resources, connections, money. And this is another scarcity script. It's similar to that. I'm not smart enough excuse. Our greatest challenge is not resources, but our lack of resourcefulness. And oftentimes, it's not that you don't have the resources, it's you don't know how to be resourceful with what you do have. The fifth script is, if I do blank, people will judge me. And this is perhaps the most insidious script of all, because you are letting the fear of judgment, or the fear from others, your fear of failure, actually control the decisions that you make. And so when you don't take action because of fear of judgment, of what other people will think, you're essentially giving your power to them and allowing them to dictate what you do, where you go. And so this one is particularly challenging. And in my experience, this is the most significant and most common one, to which I would ask the question, and this is a question that Seth Godin, I believe, first asked or made popular, but he said, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? All right? Because at the end of the day, we live our lives filtered by fear. Every decision we make is based on, will we fail or not? And we're afraid of that. Because at the end of the day, we're afraid of being judged. And so if you knew you would be successful and you knew there was no chance that you would fail, what would you do? In your marriage, in your finances, in your fitness, in your business, in parenting, whatever the situation is for you. So for me, those are the top 5, I would say, toxic scripts that just live on repeat in our head.
Yeah, so good. And I think I think that for those listening, if you run through the places that you've been stuck in your life, either now or in the past, you'll see that it almost always is one of those things. But as you're going over that, there's 5, but it's like I can even go a layer deeper, because it seems like scarcity underlies 2 or 3 of them, and fear of failure, which is really fear of judgment, is another big one. So it's like everything kind of boils down to those, because those things are on the opposite side of safety. To be to have scarce resources, or to be judged by our peers, which is the pack in our hunter-gatherer mentality, feels like death. To be ostracized from those around us is the same as a death sentence. When you're talking about living in a hunter-gatherer tribe of 100 people, which is how we evolved for X many hundreds of thousands of years. Now, fear of failure, fear of judgment feels like putting out a post on social media and no one liking it, or going to raise your hand in an office meeting when your boss says, does anyone have any ideas? And you have a great idea, but you don't want to be judged for it. So all of that stuff shifts and now goes from something that was protective in the past to now something that is actively holding you back. So I would love for you now to segue into those frameworks that you have to help anyone listening start to break free from these things that have been holding them back.
Yeah, I love that you went there with our ancestry, because I think that's so key, and we don't necessarily understand that. That's actually how we're wired. And this is why it's so hard, because we're fighting thousands and thousands of years of DNA. So it's tricky. And this is why we got to do the deep work, but nobody wants to do that. Everyone wants the quick fix, right? They want the 6-pack. They want the great marriage. They want the big bank account, fill in the blank. We all want the medal without running the race. And so what we're doing is teaching you how to run the race and run it well. And so you can get that medal. But yeah, so the framework that I teach is simply called the clear thinking process, okay? So it's a 5-step process. It's an acronym, CLEAR. Okay, so the first step is to call out the lie. Okay, this is where we actually we'll identify what it is. So you might write the phrase, the story I'm telling myself about blank is, and here's where you go into detail and get honest with yourself. And this is not just a data point. This is the way you see yourself currently. You might write things like, I'm just an angry man, or I'm an angry mom, or I'm too far gone, or I've missed a moment, or I'm always going to be poor, or I'm fill in the blank. But this is not a truth. This is a tape. And that's playing on repeat. And what we need to do is push stop on that. The second step is locate the source. Okay, so now we have to identify where it came from. So you might write the phrase, the people or situations that have started this or reinforced this story are, and you fill in the blank. Now, it's important that you name the source, because when you can identify where it came from, you can break its power. Because this might have come from like a high school bully in like grade 3. It could have come from anybody back in your history. We know that 80% of how we see the world and how we see ourselves is formed before we're even 12 years old. This is why we have to look so far back into the past to identify where these things come from. And so step 2, locate the source. Step number 3, E, which stands for evaluate the cost. And this is my favorite step. Because the question is, what has living by this lie cost you? Does it cost you your peace, your confidence, your marriage, your career? What? And you might write the phrase, the results I'm getting from telling myself this story are fill in the blank. Now, it's important for you to feel the weight of that, not to shame yourself, but to get leverage to change it. Then the fourth step is A, which stands for affirm the truth. Okay, now this is where we start to get practical. This is where we flip the script. And you write a new statement that's more true than this lie that you've been believing. And that's the question you're going to ask yourself. What else could be as true, if not more true, than this thing that I was believing? And so, for example, for me, when I was a young boy, I was typically told that you're not the smart one in the family, and you're going to be an alcoholic like your dad. And so for me, affirming the truth was writing out that statement. I am an intellectual. I'm focused. I'm of sober mind, and I have much to offer this world and those I love. And so notice the certainty-based language there. I wasn't saying, I hope to be an intellectual. I hope to be of sober mind. I'd like to one day offer much to the world and those I love. So I wrote that statement, and it was also present tense. I am, right? So that's where you flip the script. And the fifth step and the final one is where the boots hit the ground. This is where we get real tactical. And this is where we are reinforced with action. And so then this is where we go from saying it to living it. What's one action that you can take this week to reinforce that truth that you wrote? For example, for me, it was, okay, well, if I'm an intellectual, then what do intellectuals do? They read books. Okay, well, I'm going to start reading books. I was already reading books, but I started reading more. Now, you can ask yourself, what are 3 to 5 things, the actions that can reinforce this? If you're writing that you are a healthy person who takes care of his body and is going to live a long, healthy life, okay, well, what does that person do? They work out. So I'm going to commit to moving my body 3 times a week because that's what healthy people do. Does that make sense?
Makes a ton of sense. And it's an amazing framework. I wrote everything down here. And listeners know I speak in acronyms all the time. And I love this one. And I'm jealous that I didn't think of it. Every step on the ladder is building. And I love the reinforce with action at the end there. Specifically, as you said, someone who's an intellectual reads. So I'm going to read, but I was already reading. And it's things like that where it's even learning to see what you're already doing as something that's in alignment with that person. Because if you are not an intellectual, yeah, I read, but who cares? That doesn't matter. Everyone's supposed to read. It's just Harry Potter or whatever that I'm reading. But it's that shift in identity and choosing who do I want to be, and you then get to decide what actions align with that. But also it starts to highlight things that you're already doing. Similar with movement. People are like, I'm going to be a healthy person, so I'm going to take actions a healthy person takes. Well, I'm going to start going to the gym more, whatever. But I already walk every day. There's a famous study with hotel maids where they took a bunch of hotel maids who clean hotel rooms, and it's a fairly active job where they're on their feet all day and they're cleaning and they're changing beds and they're getting X many steps every day. And they interviewed them and they asked them, how often do you exercise? And they answered, oh, well, most of them, I don't have time to exercise. I don't exercise. I just work, yada, yada. So then the experiment was they informed some of them and gave them literature supporting the fact that, hey, did you know that just getting 10,000 steps a day is actually considered exercise? Did you know that all of the lugging heavy bags of laundry is exercise? Did you know that all of these things are exercise? And some of the women got this information. That's the experiment group. And some of the women didn't get that information. They were just the control group. And then they came back and they studied how many calories and how much weight these women lost. And it turned out that the women who had been informed that they were actually exercising lost weight over a, I think, 3 month span or something like that. So now it's like, well, how is that possible? How does that happen? And some people believe that it's just through the power of belief, that because they thought they were exercising, that it had more effect on them. But I think a more realistic thought is that once they learned that they were exercising, or that what they were doing could be considered exercise, they're more either consciously or subconsciously likely to take a little bit extra step, to take the stairs instead of the elevator, to say, you know what, I don't mind lugging this bag an extra 2 floors because I'm getting something out of it. And all of those small subconscious decisions, conscious or subconscious, then go on to reinforce the action. And it becomes a flywheel that reinforces itself. But when I think about all of this, the challenge that I come to is, how do I do that when the story, as you said, you got a very challenging story when you were young, but that story was different than what you believed and different than your action. You're like, well, I was told I wasn't an intellectual, but I've been working really hard. I've been reading books. I've been doing all this stuff. But what happens, or how do you break out of that cycle when the story that you've been told has actually been the truth that you've lived in your life? Like, I am poor and an alcoholic, and I am the dumbest of my mom's 5 kids. And so why would any of that not be true? How do I start to shift my identity at that point?
Mm. Yeah, no, that's really good. Like what you're saying is, it's a giant self-fulfilling prophecy. And the deeper we get in that cycle, it spirals downward, and it becomes stronger and stronger. And it feels like roots pulling us into the ground. And so there are 3 things that I would advise anyone who's feeling stuck. Because at the end of the day, I can give you all these exercises, but if you don't have the courage to do that, then you're still going to be stuck. So there are 3 things that I'd love to really bring our attention to. I think that would be significant. Number 1 is getting yourself around a community. For example, with me, what I did is I reached out to 5 men, the 5 areas that I needed to grow in. I was 60 pounds overweight. We were on the verge of divorce. I was $100,000 in debt, medicating with alcohol and drugs every day, trying to cope. I was let go of a senior leadership position. My life was literally like imploding. And what I did was I reached out to 5 men in my life who could help me in the different areas that I needed help in, financially and relationally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And so what I did was I actually just looked in my own circle, and I said, who's got the healthiest marriage that I know? Who's the most jacked? Who's in the best shape that I know? Who has the most money that I know? And I went through, and I literally, man, I laid my pride down. I laid my ego down, and I said, hey, you seem like you're really crushing it in this area. You seem to have an amazing marriage. Would you be willing to like sit and talk with me like once a month? I'll take you out for a beer, coffee, whatever. And would you be able to just share with me some things that you've learned? And I eventually created a framework around this called the Iron 5. And so if your listeners, I don't know if we've specified this yet or not, but I pretty much work exclusively with men. And so every one of my clients have their own Iron 5, 5 men who surround them. The reason why is because they will hold you high when you feel low. You know, these men, your ceiling is their floor. They're living where you want to go. And these are the guys who will call you, or if you're a woman listening, these are the women that will call you up and hold you to the standard that you said you wanted. They will pull the gold out of you, call out that potential in you, because you will feel that pull to self-sabotage constantly. But being surrounded by a community of people is so significant. And we often talk about this lone wolf mentality, and that's very popular in masculine circles. But I'll tell you, man, the lone wolf literally dies alone. A strong wolf builds a pack. This is so significant. It takes a village to raise a child. Well, I say, well, yeah, that's true. It also takes a village to raise a father, because we are going to face challenges and adversity. So community is one big piece. The second big piece is hiring a coach, or getting professional help, whether it's a therapist or a coach or an advisor, whatever the situation is for you. Because what they can do is collapse the amount of time to take this lesson, to learn this lesson. I had to almost lose everything. And then it took me about 3 or 4 years of deep, hard work, studying, reading voraciously, accountability, mentorship. And it was a long road, and I floundered a lot. So bringing in someone who can help expose those blind spots and really expedite that process and collapse the amount of time it takes to get there. If you could say, yeah, I want to do the work to improve my marriage. I want to do it on my own through trial and error. It could take 4 years, 5 years, or you could do it in 6 months. What would you choose? We do this all the time in our life. You got a problem with your car, you don't hesitate to take it to a professional, a mechanic. I mean, you could try to figure it out on your own, but the vast majority of us will mess it up. This exists all the time, but yet we hesitate to do it when it's about our personal life. So I would say coaching to collapse the time. And the third reason, and these last two things, the community and the coaching, is really what builds into this, is the confidence competence loop. Confidence competence loop, if you're not familiar with it, really is what it says. When you have the courage to take a step and to do something, you gain a little bit of confidence or competence even. You could start that way. Let's think about it like in the context of public speaking. You get an opportunity to present to your team at work. Then all of a sudden you get a little bit more competent because now you've done this. Maybe you get some positive feedback from your colleagues. You're like, oh, well, that helps with your confidence. So it gives you the confidence to take the next step to maybe do another one, which causes you to research. Maybe you do a little online course on how to speak publicly, and then boom, you get more competence. Then you do it again, and then you get more confidence. And so this loop begins. And this is essentially what starts. And that the hardest thing is getting it started. But you take any area you want to grow, get around a community. I don't care who it is. Your Iron 5 could be anybody. And then you want to consider bringing in a professional. And then you get that confidence, competence loop started. Man, you'll be unstoppable in any area.
Yeah, that's great. Community, I think, is such a overlooked one, but it's so good to short circuit. That was the issue. The reason you brought all that up is because I said, well, how do you do this if this hasn't been you in the past? You haven't had that story. You don't have the confidence or the competence to go back to that, to start the loop. So you short circuit that by finding other people who do, by finding someone who is ahead of you on that curve so that they're able to either teach you or bring you along. Or the way I phrase coaching to a lot of people is, you're just borrowing my confidence. Yep. You don't know what to do. I do. I've been doing this for 15 years. So you don't have to think, oh, is this the right move? Is this the right thing to eat, to exercise, to listen to read, whatever? It's like, yes, it is. I can tell you that confidently. So having someone who is a little bit farther ahead of you is so paramount in building that courage. I love that you use that word. I use the word confidence a lot, but I would love if you could expand a little bit on why you landed on courage as being such an integral, foundational part of what you're trying to build with the people you work with.
The reason why I use the word courage, and it is intentional, and people often ask me, what's the difference in confidence and courage? I say, well, courage doesn't feel good. Confidence does, right? And that's the biggest differentiator. You think about, what does it take to be courageous? No one who's ever being courageous ever is confident to do it or comfortable. You think about a firefighter who's literally running into a building that's on fire. You think he's just chill? No. Courage, to be courageous, means to act in spite of fear. Not because you're calm and if there's nothing to be afraid of, there's no courage. It doesn't feel good. It's really, really hard. And so the reason why we want to be courageous is because when we're courageous, it primes us to continue to take actions in spite of how we feel, or despite how we feel, despite adversity, because that's the problem. We're obsessed with being comfortable. We're obsessed with having an easy life. And the reality is, that's never going to happen. David Data, in his book, The Way of the Superior Man, calls it the great masculine error, thinking that one day it's all going to make sense. One day it's going to be easy. One day I'm just going to understand my wife. One day I'm just going to be able to eat whatever I want and not have to worry about it. No, you won't. And I love this phrase, choose your hard. This idea that having no friends is hard. Having a lot of friends is hard. Having no money is hard. Having a lot of money is hard. Building a business is hard. Working for somebody else is hard. Being in great shape is hard. Being overweight is hard. And the one that I love is having a great marriage is hard. Walking through divorce is also hard. And so the goal is not to have an easy life. The goal is to choose the pain you're willing to embrace. What's the thing you're willing to suffer for? And go all in. And this doesn't make for great motivational speaking, but I'm convinced the more people that I coach, the more that I walk down this road, the sooner you accept and embrace this, the sooner you will be content and confident and courageous, and all those things will come. But we don't act in spite of fear. We freeze. We're not courageous because we don't like being uncomfortable, and you cannot be courageous and comfortable at the same time. It's impossible. And so that's why I use the word courageous a lot.
I love that. I love the distinction between courageous and confidence in spite of fear when it doesn't feel good. I think that that's so impactful. And I'm right there with you. It's funny because obviously this podcast is called Change Made Easy. So I get always people talking about we have to do hard things. And that's the number one pushback I get either from guests or just from people when talking about my podcast. They're like, no, but you have to do the hard thing. And that was originally when I first started brainstorming ideas. The name I wanted to make this podcast was Do the Hard Thing. It was a book that I wrote that I never did anything with, because the conclusion I ended up coming to is that, to me, that's a foregone conclusion. Everything is hard. Like you just said, all of those things are hard. It's hard to be in shape. It's hard to have a good relationship. It's hard to be rich. If it wasn't, we would have already done it. Just the fact that you don't have it leads me to believe that it's hard, because you do easy things all the time. You microwave a meal. You don't make a 5-star tasting menu. You tie your shoe. You watch more Netflix. You don't accidentally read a book. So things that are easy get done, and things that are hard aren't. So it's not that I'm like, avoid hard things when I talk on this podcast. It's the opposite. It's all of those things are hard. I want to make those things that are hard just a little bit easier, or a lot of it easier, as easy as we can make them, so that they're more palatable to you, so that you actually do the thing long enough to get the result. Because when we talk about the big pillars in life, as I said, health, wealth, and relationships, these are things that last forever. So I think that a lot of goal setting in the motivational space is short-sighted. It's like, all right, 6-month goals, or how do you get to this big milestone of losing a certain amount of weight or getting a certain amount of money in your bank account. But then what? If it's not sustainable in the long term, I don't think that really matters. To me, it doesn't. I'm like, I don't want to help someone make a change that then they lose. As you said, 95% of people who lose weight gain it back. I have no interest in being one of those fake success stories on Instagram that shows a before and after of someone who lost a bunch of weight, and I'm their coach and I helped them lose all this weight. But what that doesn't show is that 6 months later, they've gained all the weight back. And I think that the route that I found that's most successful to people is to, yes, be courageous to do hard things. Yes, put yourself in uncomfortable situations. Yes, understand that it's going to suck a lot, maybe most of the time, maybe more often than it doesn't suck. That is just the entry ticket to life. There's no getting around that. But now I think where I might diverge from some people, and I'm curious to know your thoughts, is that understanding that, where I used to say that, it's the no pain, no gain, lean into that discomfort. I think the discomfort is again, the entry ticket, but now it's how do we take that discomfort and how do we find a way that you can dial down the discomfort, make yourself almost excited about it. And that's how you get real long-term results and consistency that give you the life that you want. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. We're getting a little bit meta here, but I think you could look at it a couple ways. You could look at it as if you're dialing it down, or you could look at it as if you're conditioning you're strengthening your resilience to actually be able to increase your capacity for adversity, which also makes it feel easier. So if you'll allow me to nerd out a little bit, there's something called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, which is a part of the brain. I know it sounds like a mouthful, but really all this is there's a brain structure that grows. It actually physically becomes more enlarged when you do difficult things, particularly things that you don't want to do. They've studied, for example, high-performing athletes, people who have overcome significant amounts of trauma, and this brain structure is actually significantly larger than, say, people who are struggle with obesity or other things, because they don't necessarily say no to themselves. In the context of, say, eating and being obese, you're typically saying yes to more foods than saying no. You're not denying yourself as much. I think we can all agree with that. And so that part of the brain structure actually begins to shrink. And here's the thing. Say, for example, if you do start working out and you don't necessarily want to do it, you don't know how to do it, that brain structure grows. But then once you knowledgeable in this and you begin to enjoy it, then it begins to shrink again. And so this is the idea, is that constantly challenging yourself actually builds capacity to be able to increase your willpower. And that's what, at the end of the day, this is what neuroscientists are believing is the root of how to grow your willpower and your discipline, or what I would say your capacity to face adversity, is to actually do difficult things, which would make it feel or seem easier. And maybe it's not that the thing got easier, it's just that your capacity to face it grew. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And that's exactly how I think of it. Getting stronger at the gym doesn't make 400 pounds weigh less.
Exactly.
You can deadlift 400 pounds because you got stronger, and that now is easier. The thing that was impossible before now is possible. It's very hard that you keep doing it. It's a little bit easier. It's a little bit easier. It's building that capacity. It's the confidence competence loop that you already explained. When I'm working with people, I like to use this framework or this lens to look at things through, because I feel it's more positive, especially when we're talking about building habits and lasting change. I ask people, are you running away from or running towards something? I want to lose 40 pounds because I hate the way I look, feels very differently than when I lose 40 pounds, I'll be a healthier version of myself and a better father. They're both the same thing. Theoretically, it's the same outcome. I want to lose 40 pounds, but one is a push and one is a pull. And one feels positive and one just feels like, well, I'm trying to get away from something I don't like. But at the end of the day, I think everyone has had this experience where you give up on those very quickly. It's not that salient. Yeah, I would like to lose 40 pounds, but when the shit gets real, times get hard, those are the type of goals that I find fall off. And the ones that are talking about building towards something, this is like define your why or a grit or whatever cliche stuff. And I'm curious because I know that something that I've heard you say before was that when you decided to make that big shift in your life, you talked about losing 60 pounds, getting out of debt, solidifying your relationship. Something that you said was the generational curses would end with me. That was a decision that you made. And that seems like a running away thing. I'm running away from the life that I don't want. So in that moment or in those years or however long it took, what was the thing that you were running towards? What was the light at the end of the tunnel that kept you motivated when things were literally hard and you didn't want to do them?
I love that you asked this question, and I'm really excited to tell you about it. There's a couple things that were significant in my journey. There are three things. So I started with honesty about where I was at, and then I looked at the end, where I was going, and then I shifted my mindset. So I'll unpack those three things. One of the first questions, my first mentor, one of these guys, my Iron 5, he had talked to me and he was asking me about my marriage. And I was getting all, my ego was showing up in the conversation. And I was like, yeah, I mean, it could be better, but we're not divorced. It's whatever. Like, we'll probably figure it out, right? And I'll never forget, man, he looked me dead in the eyes and he said, and how's that going for you? How's that working in your marriage? That attitude that you'll figure it out, that you're going to get there on your own. And then I started to ask myself that question in my fitness when I was 60 pounds overweight, and I had an unbreakable emotional addiction to food. How's that going for me? It's not going well. My current level of thinking, my current level of decision making got me to where I am today. And if I'm honest with myself today, Paul, the decisions I made 3 to 5 years ago lead me exactly to where I am today. It makes total sense as to why I am where I am, given the decisions I've making over the last 3 to 5 years. Now, if I want to be somewhere different in the next 3 to 5 years, I have to make different decisions today. So honesty, how's that working for me? And if it's working and you are thriving in your relationships and you're in great shape and you're doing well financially, amazing. Kudos. But if it's not, you got to get honest and real with yourself, right? So that was the first one, honesty. And I know we all struggle with this, but especially men, because it's so easy for us to prop ourselves up on ego and our pride. So honesty. The second piece is beginning with the end in mind, looking to the future, externalizing. Stephen Covey in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, chapter number 2 is called Begin with the End in Mind. Napoleon Hill talked often about begin with the end in mind. One of the greatest thought leaders of our time. My transformational moment was when I was singing at the funeral of this philanthropist. And the minister was sharing all these stories about the life that he lived and the people that he helped. And then he asked the congregation, are you living a life worthy of imitation? He said, if you were to die today, would you be proud of the legacy that you left? And I thought, Paul, in that moment, as I was getting ready to sing the last song, there were 2,000 people in the room. Man, if I were to die today and this was to be my legacy, or like this was my funeral, no one would be saying, he inspired me to have a better marriage. He inspired me to be in better shape. He inspired me how to steward my finances. Nobody would have said that. In fact, there'd be very few people at my funeral. And so for me, that was a sad moment. But that was me literally beginning with the end in mind. And so what I do with my clients is one of the first steps we do is we write our own eulogy. Not from the perspective of us, because again, we can get, our egos can get in the way, everything else can get in the way. We write this eulogy from the perspective of our wife, our husband, or our children. And so I'll say to my client, like, if you were to die today, what would your wife say about who you were, the man, father, and husband you were as she stood over your coffin? And it's super visceral and it's kind of morbid, but it is so powerful. And then they begin to write, what would my wife say? Well, Mitchell was a what? Who did he care for? What was he known for? A big question. What do you want to be known for? And then we take the version 2.0. If you were 100% the person that you were called to be, that you were living at 100% of your potential, that you were dialed in, what would they say then? And then we identify the gap, because the person you are today and the person you want to become, within that gap is where your tension, your frustration, your anxiety lives. And so that's what we do, is we begin with the end in mind. We get very, very clear. What do we want to be known for in this life? And we begin to reverse engineer that. And that eulogy writing exercise is a very sobering way to get incredibly clear as to what you want. And then the third piece, so those were two things that helped me. And then the third piece was a mindset shift. And I want to mention and give a shout out to Dr. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan, because they wrote a book called The Gap and the Gain. Phenomenal book. So this is just a frame in which you could see your life. So you can choose to live in the gap, which is where we constantly look to the future and compare ourselves to some ideal, something that hasn't happened yet, some vision of the future, and we don't even have clarity on that. But the problem is that is a constantly moving target. It's horizon thinking. So Paul, it's like if me and you were in a rowboat, and I was like, all right, Paul, and we're stranded in the middle of the ocean. And I'm like, if we just roll as fast as we can to the horizon, we'll be good when we get there. Well, the problem is with the horizon, is the faster you row, the faster it gets away from you. And so the challenging thing is when we think that way, we end up striving. We end up stressed out. We're constantly reaching and stretching, and we're overwhelmed. And we're living out of this not yet, this place of not yet, versus choosing to live in the gain, which is where instead of looking into the future, we actually look into the past. And we compare our progress to where we've come from, all that we've accomplished. And so I love how you kind of set it up earlier in talking about celebrating, some of your successes and choosing to be grateful and all those different things. And the gain mindset says, well, yeah, I still have 20 pounds to lose, but I already lost 20. That's amazing. This was a real key moment we had with me and my wife when we went out during Father's Day. I was caught in this trap. It was a real kind of sobering moment. And she asked me, what do you want to do for Father's Day? I said, I'd like to go for like a run. And my boy is only 22 months, so we put him in the stroller. She was like, okay. She hadn't ran since she had our son, so she was a little bit skeptical, but God love her. She just wanted to help. She just wanted to give me a great Father's Day. So we went out for a run, and we took the dog, and we're running, but it's super hot. And I put on this weighted vest. I strapped on 20 extra pounds, and the dog is pulling the leash, and I'm hot, and she's like complaining because her legs feel heavy. And I'm thinking in that moment, man, this was a dumb idea. What are you thinking? You're out here sweating. She doesn't want to be here. The dog's tugging. This is the worst. Why would you ruin everyone's Father's Day by doing this? Nobody wants to be here. That was me getting caught in the gap. And then I had this moment where like, boom, it switched. And I thought, holy crap, I'm stuck in the gap trap. And then I started to think, wait a minute. It's Father's Day, which means I've been blessed with a son. That puts me, there are so many people in this world that can't even have children. It's a beautiful day. It's warm. It's sunny. I have a wife that wants to make this day great for me. I can run. My legs work. Not only can I run, I can actually strap on extra weight and run with that. I have every reason to be so grateful. And I had this moment like I'm literally living in answered prayers. I'm literally living out the things that I prayed for my whole life. And so for me, it was like, wow. But nothing changed about my external circumstances. Everything was still the same. It's just how I saw it changed. My mind. And I was moved emotionally, legitimately. And it was like this emotional whiplash moment where one moment I was pissed off and ungrateful to being so overwhelmed with gratitude. And nothing actually changed. Just this thing, this 6 inches between my ears. And that is powerful. And so learning that lesson back then, it was significant because when I was down and when I was stressed and when the self-sabotager was coming up, I wouldn't look forward to all the work that I had to do, the weight I had to lose, the marriage I had to repair. I looked back to where I came from. And so I chose to live in the gain. And so those are 3 things for me that kept me rooted, was being honest with myself, beginning with the inner mind, having a very clear picture of where I'm going, and then constantly taking myself out of the gap and into the gain.
It's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm glad that I asked that question as well. The last 2 questions that I want to ask are the same 2 questions I ask all my guests. And the first is, what is the change that you want to see in the world?
Ooh, yeah. That's so good. Well, the big change that I want to make in the world, at the end of the day, obviously, if you haven't heard by now, I'm pretty passionate about helping men end generational cycles. And so I'm on a mission, man, to help 500,000 men reclaim their home, their health, and their happiness through media and mentorship. And that's because the statistics are wild around what happens when children don't have a father in the home, in their lives. So, for example, if you'll allow me to share some statistics real quick. In the U.S. today, 1 in every 4 kids will grow up without a father, not knowing their father. And the statistics around this is crazy because we know that 63% of youth suicides come from fatherless homes. 90% of homeless and runaway children don't know their father. 85% of kids with behavioral disorders have no relationship with their dad. 71% of high school dropouts come from fatherless homes. And so the truth is today, men have never been more confused and stressed out and medicated, and they feel like they don't have purpose. They don't know how to show up. But the truth is that the world needs you, that your family needs you, that your partner needs you, your children need you. And so be encouraged today to know that your presence matters. So when you choose, and I say this in the beginning of every single episode of the Dad Nation podcast, I say when the dad gets better, the whole family wins, because we carry a significance in the home where we are the model. We are the blueprint. I say this all the time. I'm like, You want to teach your kids about how to have a healthy relationship? Well, your marriage or your relationship is their first classroom. They learn it from you. So if you don't have the courage to step up for yourself, then do it for them. So that would be my encouragement.
Yeah, I love that. I couldn't agree more. The last thing is, if you had one action step that listeners could take right now today to start making whatever change they're trying to make just a little bit easier, what action could they take?
Yeah, I would say reach out. Like we talked about community and coaching. Don't think that you can do this on your own, because if you could, you would. And this is not coming from a place of like arrogance or like, oh, look at me, I have it figured out. It's because I almost just destroyed my entire life. And so I'm not preaching at you. I'm on your level with you, because even now I'm still working it out. I'm still learning lessons. And this is the reason why I started all this whole movement, was because I said to myself, the only shot I have at living a life worthy of imitation, or being a great father for my son, or being a great husband, is to dedicate my life to this and surround myself with other men who are doing the same. Immerse myself in this, hire people to help. And so take the courageous step, right? Not the easy step, the courageous step. Act in spite of your fear, and reach out and get involved in either a community. It doesn't have to be mine or anyone. Like, it could be whoever else that resonates with you. Find someone that's reputable and that has a great message and values that align with yours, and just take the step, because so much lies on it. And we know that 95% of the decisions that we make today are the exact same as the decisions we made yesterday. And so hear me when I say the vast majority of our lives are lived on autopilot. Only 5% of the decisions we make are different today than yesterday. This is why we can wake up a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and life looks the same. I know this to be true because I talk to men every single day that say the exact same thing. And so if you want something different, you have to make a different decision. So that would be my encouragement to you.
Don't forget about the free Change Made Easy private Facebook community. Come join hundreds of change seekers just like you and receive free trainings, resources, and direct help from me that will help make your quest for change easy. Just go into the show notes of whatever app you're on right now and click the link that says Facebook group. You'll be directed to my private Facebook community that's just for clients and listeners of this podcast. And as a bonus, you'll get a free hour-long training on eliminating self-sabotage. All you have to do is click Facebook group in whatever app you're listening on right now.